So we'll have a little shorter class today. But this is part 3 of the Zenos parable. And so just kind of a quick review. So the house of Israel was compared to a tame olive tree, or an olive tree that had been nurtured and raised up. Olives don't just, you can't just take olives and plant them in the ground and turn out great olives. You have to do a lot of work to make olives produce. And so the tree begins to decay, which is a symbol for Israel beginning to dwindle in unbelief. Even though God had done all this nurturing, Moses and all through ever since the covenant was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel had continued to dwindle into unbelief and getting pulled into idolatry and other things. And so the master prunes, cultivates, he does all these things for Israel, sends them prophets, sends them miracles, all these things to try to bring them back to him. And he was able to produce some young, tender branches. So you had some highlights through history, righteous men, righteous women that, that stood out among a history of idolatry and other sin. But ultimately, the top of the tree began to die. So everything above the top of the tree was corrupt and was going to ruin the tree. And so the master instructed the servant, which, I believe is Jesus, or mercy, to gather the wild olive branches. So now he's going to say, okay, this tree is dying. It's not going to make it. Let's bring in these wild branches that they're not ready to eat. They're not good fruit, but they're healthy. So let's bring them and plug them into the tree. Let's bring these Gentiles in to the gospel, or into the covenant. And so the decaying branches are plucked and burned, which, I think stands for the leadership of Israel. All these evil kings, all the idolatry that they got involved in were removed, plucked and burned. And then these young, tender branches that are surviving in the tree were plucked from the tree and taken to other parts of the vineyard and planted, so that original branches from the tree could still be intact. And in the meantime, he took these wild olive branches and plugged them into where those tender branches were. And so you had Gentiles being plugged in. Meanwhile, he's taking out these tender branches and placing them elsewhere in the vineyard. And so remember, it talked about the four places that they went, symbolic of the 4 quarters of the earth, take it all over the earth. And so now you've got these original olive branches, or these parts of the original tree that are tied into that covenant. Now you've got it all over the world, as well as Gentiles who are now tied in as well, that now have access to the covenant. And so a long time passes by. So he's kind of set this up. He's dispersed all the lost tribes are sent all over the world. And now you've got this long time that passes away. And then the master and the servant, they say, let us go down into the vineyard. So they go together personally into the vineyard to look at how it's done. And they find that there has been some good fruit. Some of these places they've taken remotely are good. But when they come over to America, they find that they have half good and half evil. Half the fruit is good, half the fruit is evil. And so the God, the Father, says, okay, let's take this tree and let's burn it, because it's, the evil's going to take over the good. Let's burn it. And the servant petitions for more time, or for more mercy. Let's give this more time. Let's let more time go by, and let's continue to nourish the tree. And so they allow another period of this long time to pass. So now they go back again. The servant and master said, let's go in together and let's look at the vineyard again. So they come back into the vineyard.
All these names of places and people that's in the Book of Mormon, are any of them in the Bible?
The places?
Places or names of people, names of places.
There is some references, yeah. I mean, it talks about, it's in Isaiah, talks about all the places that have been, that are lost. But what is that, you're talking about geography wise, or you're talking about peoples?
Either one.
Either one, yeah. There is. I mean, what's that?
People's names.
People's individual names? Not that I recall. But
Well, I learned something interesting, Winston, that
oh yeah,
the name Lehi is in the Bible.
I saw that the other day.
yeah.
It's in the story of Solomon.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Samson.
Oh, okay.
Story of Samson.
Yeah. It's now accepted among even biblical scholars that Lehi was a legitimate Hebrew name in the, in 600 BC.
I think of all the time that we've been ridiculing,
Mm-hmm.
and now that they're kind of having crawfish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. And the more things get proven true, like all the Hebrew parallels and all the poetry and all the stuff that they didn't know anything about in 1830, and yet we still want to point out this one thing that we haven't figured out yet, this one anachronism, and we say, oh, it's all got to be a lie, It's just, I don't know, it's amazing. But people believe what they want to believe,
It's difficult to turn
Right?
away from the indoctrination that they have received.
Yeah.
I know personally, I've been accused of being a part of the cult. And I'm saying, no, you're thinking of you talking.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Speaking of that, did you hear that their prophet died yesterday?
No.
Yeah,
101 years old.
101. Yeah. But it'll be interesting to see what they do now. I don't know who's next in line. But anyway.
When you were talking about, the steps that led up to Gentiles coming into the covenant, I kept thinking about how when God was leading them out of Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
he actually, he was feeding them, he was cultivating, and nourishing them with manna and, quail and things like that. And then he said the snakes and the only people that survived were the ones that did look up at the staff, so, and then they had to walk around for 40 years waiting for that older generation that wouldn't let go of Egypt's idols before they could go in and, and then they started having to deal with the world, and first with like Jericho, and they had to rely on that woman from Jericho to lead them, get them out and stuff like that. I mean, and so it was their first, that segue into cutting off those older branches that wouldn't let go of idols.
Mm-hmm.
The only young branches that were left were the ones that got to go to the promised land.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like the parable can repeat itself through big sections of Jewish history where Gentiles came in, that older, more idolistic frame of mind has to be tossed out and burned.
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen this story just keep repeating over and over, where God reveals himself to man, man repents, man humbles himself. They have this sort of golden age. I mean, they had it in the in the New Testament, with the apostles. They had it over here. You had it during like the Jaredites' time. You had it. I mean, you've seen it throughout history. And yet, it just takes a few generations and we're sliding right back into dwindling and unbelief, as the Book of Mormon says. It's amazing how it all parallels, and we just repeat it over and over and over, just different players.
About it, in like the parable of the olive tree. I've learned that you can't just take a scripture and just read through the Bible and you read over things and then you continue on. You miss so much if you don't break it down like what we're doing here, and so that we can compare what was in the story of Samson and see all this, the backstory on what all he's going through, the things he did that he shouldn't have done, his anger. I mean, it's like you go to another place uh, and studying the Bible, and you find another character that in different ways are carrying out the backstory of what we read in Solomon. And it just reinforces what's going on here is pointing to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss that. I missed it for a long time.
Yeah.
But the more I studied, the more I'm beginning to realize that this is not a coincidence.
Well, I think too, like compounding on that, it's leading you to Jesus, but it's also humbling. I mean, the only way to get to Jesus is to be humble. And the only way to be humble is to realize how weak human nature is. And then we hear all these stories that the reason why Jesus, God has to intervene is because we're all so stupid. We all think we're so smart and we got it all under control. I did a 3-day fast this week, which it doesn't seem like a really big deal until you get to that third day and you just want to die. And literally, but once I finally came out of it, and it took a while for me to recover because I have no fat stores. I was starving. And so it took me another 4 days to recover from it. Really, literally, I'm still kind of recovery. But my mindset changed so much just over 3 days of being reminded how weak and frail a human being is. You know what I mean?
Right, we can't survive a minute without God.
Exactly.
And even when you think about people who have these profound spiritual experiences, it takes a blink of an eye for them to turn to sin. Look at Noah. I mean, he just saw everybody wiped out because of iniquity. And what does he do after all that experience? But he goes and gets drunk. Then you look at David, who had this wonderful relationship with God. And then he can't be satisfied with his harem. And then he finds some other man's wife. And
killed him.
Yes, right. And now it's easy to stand back and judge, but then you think, well, how many times has the Holy Spirit touched me? And then it doesn't take long for me to do something stupid.
Well, and that's what, this 3 days being completely weak. I mean, I was in so much pain I couldn't even sleep. You think, oh, well, you're so hungry, you can just go to sleep. But your head hurts too bad, you're up every 30 minutes. Oh, you can get to sleep, but staying asleep is a whole other thing. The thing is that it just made me not think about what I want. It made me think about what I need. And so when I was coming out of the fast, I wasn't thinking about, eating some Doritos or, having a soda. It was more, my focus was about what I needed, not about what I wanted. And it just, the whole experience was just really, it wasn't like a mountaintop experience. It was just a reminder of what a valley I really am. You know what I mean? And how the only way to get up to a mountaintop experience is with God. Like my own personal strength is just weakness. And it was just such a refreshing reminder. And it's just changed my attitude.
And we'll get into this when I have a computer next time. But I talked about the fruit. Later on, it talks about there's the fruit. The tree is covered. The original tree is covered in fruit. But all of it is bad. And it makes a comment that the tree overcame the root. In other words, it started to be self-reliant. It trusted in itself. And so it'd been producing all this fruit, but none of it was from the root of the tree. It was healthy from the root. It was more like superficial. And I don't know if that's even possible in reality, but at least in the story, that's how it worked. And so all the fruit was bad. And I think about us and our society. We produce all this fruit and we call it works, but if we're not doing it connected to the tree with a real relationship with God, then it just becomes dead, like worthless fruit, And so You think, when she was fasting, I was fasting too. We're thinking in terms of what really is important in life. And I am really so weak, that I, missing a meal, and that's all I can think about is I gotta eat, and it's like, if I had that kind of passion for God, where is God? Where is God? Why am I alive? Why am I alive? If we had that kind of passion for him, then we would bear fruit that was real fruit and not just this, works that just cumbers the tree that's worthless and has to just be thrown away, and that's what this thing's, it's so cool about this parallel, because there's so many things that parallel and are examples of who we are and how our relationship is with God,
Well, and the class is what inspired me to do fast, because I was like, I just couldn't get it out of my head. I'm like, I don't want to be no good fruit. You know what I mean? Like, I got to thinking about it, and he was like, none of it was good. And I'm like, I don't want to be none. You know what I mean? But then I thought about it. It's like, when I'm healthy and I'm eating and I feel pretty good, I don't feel like I need God. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to go do what I want, and then I'll pray at the end of the day. Does that make sense?
Well, it's not that you think, oh, I don't need God.
Right.
But you just do what you're gonna do, and then at the end of the day, you're like, oh yeah, I didn't ask God today about any of this. Yeah. No.
But when we think in a temporal way about the fruit of our labors, okay? So you have a job and you make money and you do the things that you want to do with it. And you could amass a huge fortune and not use it to please God.
Right.
And it's nothing.
Right.
There's
You got all this money, but no wisdom to do what's right with it, or what could really actually benefit
so
you.
that's an example of like fruit that's born but is useless.
Right.
Yeah. We're gonna get into we'll finish up the story, and then I found a whole bunch of really cool parallels in Scripture. So Isaiah has a story of a vineyard that parallels to this story. Paul talks about a vineyard and it parallels, and when you put them all side by side and Jesus, when you put them all side by side and graph them, it's incredible. The message is so consistent from God, so it's not like any one of these is its own separate thing. They're all the same, just said in different ways using different parallels to help us understand. But we'll go over
A lot of really great insight.
Yeah, well, it'll be the next class, or maybe even the next one after that we'll get it deep into the chiastic stuff that's really beautiful in this story. So I guess that's all I have. I apologize for the tech errors, and
This was good discussion.
yeah, for sure.
Very good.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks.